Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the ReliefFactor.com studio, inside of the Beltway. Joined today in my broadcast studios by none other than Ralphie, the studio dog, who, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can now see. Of course, we are always happy to have a Westie in the studio. This is my grand dog, and the grand dog goes with me to the studio when the grandkids... when the kids are out of town. He is not one of the grandkids, he is the grand dog, and so Ralphie likes to come to the studio with me, and the fetching Mrs. Hewitt doesn't mind at all when Ralphie gets up early and comes to the studio with me. So Ralphie's wearing a collar because of an unfortunate incident at the hair cuttery. I don't know anything about that stuff. I've never owned a dog. This is the only child of mine that wasn't allergic. So if you happen to notice a dog, just hang around the studio.
He had a grooming incident?
He had a grooming incident.
So he really is related. We're beginning early, are we? I really was happy to have him today because the last thing we found of O'Connor on Key Bridge was a Paw Patrol shirt, and we don't know what's happened to him. But I went in and out of the city last night over the Memorial Bridge, checked the bridge. We're fine. I don't know what the president was worried about, but I went to hear Andrew Roberts last night, and I heard a great joke, though, by the way. I'd never heard it before. It's a Mel Brooks joke that Andrew Roberts told. The opposite of comedy is Germany. Isn't that pretty good? Did you ever hear that? I thought that was a pretty good. That may have come out of the Blazing Saddles era. That sounds like a Mel Brooks line.
Yeah, the opposite of comedy is Germany. I also love the line that Andrew Roberts delivered last night. You can always count on the French to be there when they need you. And so I just thought it was a terrific, it was wonderful by Andrew Roberts. But let's do the news, shall we, even though it's a dog day in D.C. President Biden has asked the Federal Trade Commission to examine oil gas companies' role in high gasoline prices. So I looked up high gas prices today because I walk a lot as opposed to drive when I'm in Virginia. And, oh, look here in California, the price of premium is now over $5 a gallon. It's at $5.05. But you say, oh, what's regular? $4.69 a gallon is regular. Now compare that with Oklahoma. Oklahoma is at $2.99. So there's another reason to move from California to Oklahoma. Not only that, California is not going to get any of the tree equity money. Oklahoma's going to get all the tree equity money, if it's really a tree equity money. Ohio, by the way, is only at $3.20. So Generalissimo loaded up Mrs. Generalissimo marauding car. She drives a hot rod. What did it cost? Did it cost $50?
No, it didn't cost. I wish it cost $50. It used to cost $50. No, it cost 20 gallons, $4.89. It costs like $96, $97, something like that.
Okay,
for
so
a tank.
Are you glad to know that the president has asked the FTC to examine oil gas companies' role in high gasoline prices? I think they're going to come back and say, take a look in the mirror, pal, the XL pipeline. Do you think that might be?
We went from net exporter of energy, oil and gas,
now,
to
don't
net
get on your high horse. I'm not here to beat up on the president. It's on the Federal Trade Commission. The oil companies are up to no good. You and I know that. And they've purposely driven the price this high because they don't like Joe Biden. I'm sure we know that.
38% approval ratings tells me that people know it's his fault.
They know it's his fault. Meanwhile, the president went to Michigan yesterday to back electric cars. And it was really, well, first of all, he doesn't know how to stand. You got to watch this. If you've downloaded the Salem News Channel app, you'll be able to watch this. If not, listen to what's going on here. Cut number 4.
So once
again, I'm on the blue marker, huh?
Yeah, the blue, and I
got to take orders.
You're here. Oh, okay.
And he walked right past the blue marker.
So
people.
again,
the
Jim
president
is
is
here, and
not
he's gonna
easily managed as a adventure in advanced control. He did, however, tell you this. Cut number 6.
Before I begin, I just want to mention 3 pieces of good news today. First, through the leading rating agencies on Wall Street, confirmed today, not a liberal think tank, 2 Wall Street outfits, that the economic proposals we put forward for the nation, the infrastructure law we just signed, and the Build Back Better plan are being considered this week in Congress will not add to inflationary pressures in the economy. And Here's what one of the agencies said, and I quote, "The bills do not add inflation pressures." Let me repeat that. Do not add inflation pressures. Reason? Because the policies I proposed, quote, help lift long-term economic growth via stronger productivity, labor force growth, as well as taking the edge off inflation.
Love to know what those companies were that told us that. Meanwhile, Elon Mew, a CNBC reporter, begged to differ, cut number 8.
Democrats also like to cite an analysis by Moody's that shows the package would boost GDP and create jobs. But that same report also projects that inflation will be higher in 2022 and 2023 if this bill is passed by as much as half a percentage point in the middle of next year. Now, Moody's calls concern about runaway inflation overdone and points out that higher inflation is a side effect of a stronger economy. But budget experts say the spending in this bill is front-loaded, while the improvements to productivity could take years to play out. And that means the inflationary pressure is greatest next year, just when the political risk is highest heading into the midterms.
Oh, you mean the president didn't really tell us what Moody's said? You mean he cherry-picked the Moody's report? I'm shocked. Senator John Kennedy went on Fox with Jesse Waters, said this, cut number 2.
Well, clearly, Jesse, inflation is a lot more important right now to the average American than a meme. One of the toughest parts of being a bartender, I am told, is figuring out who's drunk and who's just stupid. And I feel a little bit like a bartender in trying to figure out the Biden administration and inflation. On the one hand, inflation is waterboarding the American people. You practically have to arrange a bank loan to fill up your gas tank. What's causing it? As any economist with a pulse will tell you, President Biden is spending too much money and he's borrowing too much money. That's the classic definition of inflation. Too much money chasing too few goods. So what's the president's solution? The other day I said that the Biden administration, I've observed, never makes the same mistake twice. They make it 5 or 6 times just to be sure. Here's the president's solution to inflation, which he has caused by spending too much and borrowing too much. Let's spend even more and let's borrow even more. He is trying to pass this Build Back Better bill, which is just a spending and borrowing orgy of epic proportions. $4 trillion of new spending, $2 trillion of new debt, $2 trillion of new taxes, and it's going to be like throwing kerosene on a tire fire.
A tire fire. I could say that a few times myself. If the opposite of comedy is Germany, then the opposite of Germany is John Kennedy. Meanwhile, Fox News put together a montage of President Biden's greatest calls to arms. Cut number 1.
The jobs that are going to be created here. Visit vaccines.gov, vaccines.com, or text your zip code to 438829. No little expression, time is money. As one computer said, if you're on the train and they say Portal Bridge, you know you better make other plans.
Now, I think I'm supposed to introduce somebody, but I'm not sure who I'm supposed to introduce now.
Lizzie Pinelli, Pinell, and what am I doing here? I'm going to lose track here.
I want to thank the former general. I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there. Now, am I supposed to speak, or is Swati going to say something? I was told I was going to hear from Swati.
A couple of my friends are going to be coming out here, I'm told, cabinet members. But, here we go. Where is everybody?
We've got 4 Thanksgivings left with the president. We haven't even got one down yet. 4 more to go. That's the early blooper reel. Thanksgiving this year is that 1 of 4 is done. That's Thanksgiving this year. Don't go anywhere, America. There are other headlines, some of them grim, some of them not so. funny, some of them pretty dire. But I'll give you all the news that is, combined with the collapse of the college Democrats, next on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Sometimes a headline arrests Gantz house cleaner accused of trying to spy on him on behalf of Iran. Turns out that the defense minister of Israel, Benny Gantz, had a house cleaner who was working for the Ayatollah. Michael Oren, former ambassador of Israel to the United States, joins us now. So, Michael, have you checked out your house cleaner yet?
I say he got his house cleaned. Which is probably not too funny. It's a very serious matter. It's the second time that this happened to Benny Gantz. They also discovered a possible, like a wiretap on his telephone, and that was during the run-up to the elections. This is actually a failing not of Benny Gantz, it's a failing of our security apparatus, because any member of that household staff has to be very clearly vetted. And somehow this guy slipped through, or he was somehow enticed during the time of his employment. But it's a very serious incident indeed.
You know, Michael, the very first job I had in the executive branch was signing off on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrants for Attorneys General Smith and Meese. And we had Soviets, East Germans, Cubans, you name it. We had them in D.C. and around the country, and we were following them, and they didn't know we were following them. But I always thought it was kind of an American deal. I just never imagined that Israel would be the target, because I figured they would figure you would figure them out, right?
Yeah, and we've had many high-placed spies over the course of Israel's history who have been subsequently, gone to prison. Not the first time this has happened. At one time, there was one in the Prime Minister's office. It was actually during the 1950s. Someone who was spying for the Soviet Union was caught, very close associate of Prime Minister Ben-Gurion. But in recent years, Israel's gotten progressively better at this. I don't recall an affair this serious at such a senior level.
Did you ever watch The Americans?
The guys have to go and investigate itself as well as the incident.
Did you ever watch The Americans, the series about the Russian sleepers who lived in the United States under deep cover in the 80s?
Could you possibly miss it? I love
it.
Okay,
well, some people did. And in that, John Boy, who was being played Associate Deputy Director of the FBI, had a pen put in his office, and it listened to him forever. And that's what they would do. I can't believe that actually happens in Israel. I just think of Israel as having the technological edge to be able to detect that kind of stuff. And Iran as being not particularly good at it.
Yeah, but this was called humans. This is human intelligence. This is not machine intelligence. This is not a bug in Benny Gantz's house. The house would be regularly swept for that. This is somebody who was unemployed, probably went through the vetting process, but afterwards was enticed to join the Foreign Intelligence Service and report on it. And the vetting process, by the way, it's not a one-time affair. It goes on. So obviously they caught him the second time. But still, again, I'm going to say this at the risk of repeating myself. It's a very serious incident, and the Shin Bet bears the responsibility for this, not Benny Gantz. So probably politically he will, unfairly, I think. And they'll have to have a very thorough investigation of this affair.
What happens to spies in Israel? Do you make exchanges with Iran in the way that the Soviets and the United States would used to make exchanges with spies, or do you execute them, or do they go to jail forever?
No, there's no execution. They'll go to jail. We don't have death penalty for spies. We don't have a death penalty, period. A lot of Israelis would like to see it, by the way. Occasionally it's an issue of the death penalty for terrorists, but it's never passed in the state of Israel. It's never come close to passing in the state of Israel. No, and I know of no exchanges with the Iranians. We have exchanges with Iranian proxies, whether it's Hezbollah or Hamas. We have made exchanges, very painful exchanges. They've become increasingly unpopular in Israel's view. Going back to the Gilad Shalit exchange, this is now over a decade ago. And Israeli was taken prisoner, the soldiers were taken prisoner by Hamas, and we ended up exchanging almost 1,000 security prisoners for Gilad Shalit. Some of those people who were released were later involved in the killing of 3 Israeli youngsters, 16 years old, which precipitated the 2014 war with Hamas. So it's become increasingly unpopular in the state of Israel. There are reports of negotiations now going on with Hamas for the release of the bodies of 2 Israeli soldiers who were killed in that conflict, and Hamas has retained their body, plus 2 Israelis who have wandered over the border into Gaza. And so, again, it's going to be a very delicate negotiation for the release of the bodies and those individuals because prisoners who have been released in exchanges have been involved in very serious subsequent terrorist attacks.
All right, last question, Dr. Oren. After 6 months in office, is the popularity of the new government holding up, or has it begun to erode?
No, it's quite popular right now. The government succeeded in passing a budget for the first time in 3 years. Everyone desperately needed that budget. And, barring any unseen sort of upheaval, say a war with Hamas, which would be very difficult for this government to handle, it doesn't seem like there's any real obstacle to this government's continued longevity. And I think that they're, objectively speaking, they're doing a pretty good job.
What happens to the Netanyahu trial? I've given you 15 seconds. Have you got a guess on that?
Well, there's a couple of new eyewitnesses that are willing to talk about how he tried to manipulate the media. The trial is just going to go on for a very, very long time, and I am unconvinced that it's actually going to be able to reach a significant verdict.
Michael Oren, always a pleasure. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I know the American in you will be celebrating on Thanksgiving. I don't think Israel celebrates Thanksgiving, but I know that all the Israelis who made Aliyah from America will be doing so. Thank you, Dr. Michael Oren. Follow him on Twitter at Dr. Michael Oren. Good morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, inside of the Beltway. Good morning to you. It's Thursday. I'm joined by Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas. Dr. Marshall, good morning. Great to have you back.
Hugh, good morning to you. A beautiful day here in the Capitol. I bet we got some great things to talk about today.
We do. I want to talk about vaccine mandates with you because you and Senator Lankford and Senator Rubio are leading the charge to cabin the ability of the president to impose mandate. Look, these are unconstitutional. I explained this to Andy Slavitt yesterday. What is it about the limited and enumerated powers of the Constitution that your colleagues across the aisle do not get?
Hugh, it's just inconceivable. It is absolutely unconstitutional, absolutely just a violation of our God-given constitutional rights. Look, I support people getting the vaccine. My parents have had it. They've had their booster. On the other end of the spectrum, my grandchildren have had the virus. I don't see the benefits outweigh the risk, and certainly don't know why a young, healthy person doesn't have the choice to take this, especially when the federal government does not take into account natural immunity. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was a technical follow. I don't know what happened there, so I'm sorry about that, Senator. But we are in exactly the same position, except my parents are gone to heaven. I've had the vaccine and the boosters. My grandkids have had COVID. They don't know whether or not they should get the boosters as a result of that. What is your has the CDC even given guidance on children who've had COVID whether or not they should get the vaccine?
Yeah, yes, they have. They want, regardless of your natural immunity, they want you to get the vaccine again. What they keep doing is they conflate natural immunity plus the vaccine as opposed to comparing natural immunity versus the vaccine. So they want you to wear a belt and suspenders, and I think that's the beauty of a doctor-patient relationship. I would never want one of your listeners to go to their pediatrician and say, well, Dr. Marshall said something. Well, I think that your pediatrician knows what's best for your grandkids, their unique medical history, and they understand the virus very well. There's not a one-size-fits-all. The federal court said what President Biden's trying to do is use a sledgehammer to solve this problem.
And it's unconstitutional.
This is not a sledgehammer problem.
Now, I want to ask you about a headline in the Post and New York Times this morning. 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 12 months during the pandemic. I spent some time last hour trying to talk about the unquantifiable consequences of lockdowns and, in fact, the rather shocking indifference of the CDC to trying to calculate the unquantifiable but nevertheless estimable side effects of lockdowns. Do you see any movement on their part towards trying to get a whole of impact analysis of the lockdown?
I do not. This is my frustration with the CDC. If it doesn't have something to do with vaccines, they're not interested in it at all. We do know, though, that shutting the economy down, shutting schools down, wearing masks has a huge psychosocial impact on people. We know substance abuses went up. We know people with depression is exacerbated when we socially isolate them. Even going to a job. I still believe that going to a job gives people meaning and hope. We want to provide for our own families. We don't want government handouts. There's dignity in a job, contributing to our community. So this number did not surprise me at all. There's record numbers of fentanyl coming across the border. There's never been easier access to these types of drugs. It is very quantifiable, and I don't know why the CDC isn't doing some of these studies. Why do we have to have the best studies coming out of Israel? Why aren't we doing our own studies?
Now, I had a great conversation with Andy Slavitt, who until a few months ago was number 2 in the Biden administration on the fentanyl task force, trying to explain to him how someone could be pro-vaccine and anti-mandate, and trying to explain to him why I, who began as a big booster of Dr. Fauci, and I still admire the man for his service, think we've just got to clean house at the NIH, at the CDC, at the task force, at everyone associated, because the credibility is shattered. Do you think we need a new start in leadership at the public health agencies?
Absolutely, we do. You know, one of the first things I learned when I started my private practice in medicine, one of the orthopedic surgeons took me aside. He said, "Young man, if a physician ever loses their reputation, they'll never get it back. If you ever lose your reputation, you'll never get it back. You're as good as the last baby you delivered. You're as good as the last surgery you did." And basically, it was a pep talk to, make sure every case is your best case. And they've lost their reputation, is where I'm going with this. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. The reality is they've lost their reputation. They're good people. I've met many of them. I think they're really good people, and they're good-natured, and they're trying to do the right thing, but they can't see their, the forest for the trees is the problem right now. Like I said, it feels like there's policy that comes out of the White House, and they told the NIH, go find some data to support our policy, as opposed to looking at all the data and then coming up with a policy. So I'm very disappointed where they are right now, and I do think it's time for a restart there in that department.
Now, this is not a moral judgment on my part. It may be on some people's part. It's an objective evaluation of their ability to do their job. In other words, if we use a baseball analogy, I know you haven't got baseball in Kansas because you got the Royals, right? We got the Guardians in Cleveland. But, if a pitcher loses their velocity, if they begin to give up the long ball, if they get the yips, like Steve Sachs at second base for the Dodgers, you got to put them on the bench. And they've objectively lost their ability to persuade. I think that's the key thing, and I try and this is not a moral judgment. They're good people. They have lost their objective ability to persuade. Am I wrong?
No, Hugh, of course, you're right. And again, to me, it's the reputation part. If a healthcare person loses their reputation, you can't trust them. The message has been too inconsistent. Probably my biggest concern is when a doctor doesn't just tell you when they don't know the answer. When a person comes to me with metastatic breast cancer, and I try to have that discussion with them, honesty is so important. There'll be questions that I cannot answer, and I'm going to have to say, look, we're going to go get a second opinion on this, but I'm going to be beside you, regardless where this virus, in this case, takes us. The CDC should say, look, we don't know all the answers. The advice is going to change as we better understand this virus. But when we don't know, we're going to say when we don't know. And I think Americans see right through it. I think the American public is way smarter than this administration gives us credit for. I've even had people ask me in the national media when I try to have this discussion with them, they'll ask me, well, do you think that lay people can actually take the truth? And I just stopped. Of course they can take the truth. You have to tell them the truth. And I can't remember I think we were probably just discussing natural immunity. And it does get a little complicated. But everybody deserves the truth.
Now, Senator Marshall, I want to change. I always begin with the virus with you because you're a doctor. But now I want to change to your perspective on this spending bill, the Build Back Better nightmare. Yesterday I talked about the tree equity provision. Tree equity is $2.5 billion in this bill. Tree equity, as far as I can tell, nobody knows what it means. It's just a dollop of money to local governments to give away to their friends. That is one of thousands of provisions in this bill that are just wastes of money. Do any of your colleagues whisper to you? They don't want to be heard by Chuck Schumer, but do they whisper to you, this is idiotic, we're not doing this?
Oh, they do more than whisper. It is, when we're sitting in the cloakroom waiting for a vote, when we're in the gym changing clothes, when we're at, a member's birthday party last night, someone who turned 87 years of age, that's the conversation. What is equity? I believe in equality. The Declaration of Independence stood on my wall in my bedroom growing up, and it promised us an abundance of opportunity, the pursuit of happiness. It didn't promise us happiness. Equity is like promising people happiness. That was not in the Declaration of Independence. God never promised us happiness. But what we're after is an equality of opportunity, not necessarily equity. I want everybody to have the same chance that I had, a first-generation college kid who got to go to medical school. I've lived the American dream. I want to make sure my grandkids, your grandkids, have the same shot at that American dream that we've had. All I can say is the word inflation, finally. When I think of this Build Back Better reconciliation bill, basically you're just talking more inflation. And boy, it's just throwing gasoline on a horrible situation already.
In California, where my production team is, gas is now $5.05 a gallon for premium. It's the highest it's ever been in California. It's lower across the country, but it's still at all-time highs across the country. This goes to your Democratic colleagues. Do they not understand they will get wiped out if they pass this bill? They will get wiped out. I mean, 50 members of the House. 4 or 5. Do they get it? Do they understand their political peril?
They don't care. They absolutely have blinders on. Hugh, it's like the southern border. They want the problem on the southern border. They want the price of gasoline to go up. They truly do. They know they can never get electric cars down into the price range of what it costs to operate a gas-powered car. So they want these problems. They don't care. They've got blinders on. I've never seen anything like it.
Senator Roger Marshall, thank you, Dr. Marshall. Keep coming back. Love to have that Kansas common sense. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Conversations around those kitchen tables that are both profound as they are ordinary. How do I cross a bridge in a snowstorm? What happened? No, think about it. You're in a situation, what happens if the bridge collapses and there's a fire on the other side? It's going to take 10 miles longer to get to the fire. People could die. I mean, this is real. This is real stuff.
This is real stuff, and this is really Hugh Hewitt really talking to Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas about the really dumb Build Back Better bill. Good morning, Senator Cotton.
Good morning. It's good to be on with you.
So are you going to drive over a bridge on the way to work today?
We will, and hopefully it won't collapse. And obviously, if the bridge collapses or closes, that's a bad thing. But you know what? That happens pretty rarely in America. But what happens every single day is that working families have to pay $4 or $5 a gallon for their gas, and they can't even fill up their cars anymore. They're just putting a half a tank in and hoping that the price will come down the next week. That's the kind of urgent concerns we need to focus on.
The highest per gallon cost of gas in the history of California is this week. It's at 2 highs this week. And they want to spend another $2 trillion. Is there a basic lack of economic understanding among your colleagues?
Of course, Hugh. The Democrats are economically illiterate. I guess I should say innumerate. They don't seem to understand that when inflation is as high as it's been in 30 years, if you spend trillions of more dollars and you continue paying people not to work, so they're not going in and producing the goods that the American people want to buy, you've got more money chasing after fewer goods, and of course the result is going to be more inflation. Higher gas prices, higher grocery prices, higher toy prices as we come up on Christmas. Now, some of this is not an accident. It's not their ignorance of basic economics. It's their goals. I mean, the Democrats' goal is to have $4 and $5 a gallon gas because they want you out of your pickup truck or your SUV and riding in a compact electric vehicle or maybe a scooter or a moped or a bicycle or whatever else it is that Pete Buttigieg is taking to work these days.
I hadn't thought about that. There is some method to the madness. Let me pause for a moment, though, and talk a little bit about China. Because the same president who gave that incoherent ramble on a snowy bridge in New Hampshire the night before had been on a Zoom call for 3 hours. Now, they started at 7:30, which is alarming anyway, because that's late in the day for President Biden. They went for 3 hours with General Secretary Xi, an evil dictator. What do you think try and put yourself, you're the least likely guy in the world to put yourself in the shoes of General Secretary Xi. But when he looks to his people around the room after that thing is over, what do you think he says?
I don't know, Hugh, but I imagine it was something with a grin that sounded like, boy, that was something, wasn't it?
I'm afraid he said go. I'm afraid he said, now is the time. We're on the clock.
Yeah, I think that the something that he thought it was incredible naivete and weakness and feebleness from the American president. She sounded extraordinarily bellicose about Taiwan, and it sounds like Joe Biden did nothing but repeat the same talking points that American presidents have been saying for many years. And
I'm not sure that he did.
Talking points might have been right, but today that's not the case.
They sent Jake Sullivan out to do cleanup duty yesterday. From the moment that the Chinese press began to report on what the General Secretary heard, which is, we won't do anything if you attack Taiwan. That's basically what they say they heard. Whether or not they heard that, I don't know, but that's what they say they heard. And we don't have any way to contradict it, so they sent Jake Sullivan out there. Are you going to talk on the floor of the Senate today about Taiwan? This is actually an imminent threat to the island.
Yeah, I think Xi Jinping, who has made it part of his personal legacy that he will be the leader of the Communist Party that reunites Taiwan to the mainland and invades and annexes it, has taken the measure of Joe Biden. And he perceives a window of opportunity between now and the end of 2024 in which he can go for the jugular. That may not be immediate. He may want to wait until he gets on the other side of the Beijing Olympics and the Party Congress next year. He's got another 3 years of Joe Biden as the president. But I think he perceives, especially after the debacle in Afghanistan, Hugh, that he has a rare window of opportunity, and that's dangerous. Oftentimes wars get started because powers believe or perceive that they have a limited window of opportunity to achieve their objectives. It's the same thinking that I believe you see in the Kremlin right now, which is why there are tens of thousands of troops on the border of Ukraine, probably getting ready to invade Ukraine.
In 1950, then Secretary of State Dean Acheson gave a speech at the Washington Press Club, which was widely viewed, some people argue this in the historian circle, as triggering the invasion of South Korea by North Korea as he drew South Korea out of the penumbra of American protection. I'm not sure what President Biden said to General Secretary Xi, but I asked Governor Christie this week, if he were president and ships were sailing from the PRC towards Taiwan, would he launch the torpedoes? And he hesitated, and he finally said yes, and we have to tell them that. Do you agree with Governor Christie?
Well, I don't hesitate on the need to defend Taiwan, Hugh. I would say this, it would be much better for the United States and obviously for Taiwan if we had a strong president who would deter China from ever thinking about going for the jugular there. We could sell Taiwan hundreds or thousands of missiles. We could do the same thing with mining technology. We could help them get their reserve forces in shape. We could help improve their cyber defenses. And we could make it clear from the very beginning to Xi that if he invades Taiwan, the United States will come to Taiwan's defense. And that includes we will take offensive strikes against the Chinese mainland for their air bases and their naval bases and their missile fields that they're using to attack Taiwan. That's what we need from a president, is to deter that kind of war from happening in the first place. But if the People's Liberation Army is invading Taiwan, then yes, the United States should be prepared to shoot down their aircraft and sink their ships.
Now, I am going to every possible potential presidential candidate, whether in 2024 or beyond. I'm going to ask them all this question, and anyone who doesn't answer it the right way is DQ'd, in my view, because the only way to deter a Putin or a Xi is to let them know clearly what the consequences will be. Has President Biden done that? I mean, Donald Trump did it, and I'm not even sure his heart was in it, but he managed to deter Xi. Do you think President Biden has done that?
No, not at all. If anything, he's supercharged the ambition of our adversaries like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and the Ayatollahs with his feebleness in Afghanistan. Or Hugh, in a town hall last week, he kind of stumbled into stating that we would come to Taiwan's defense But then the next day, he had his Secretary of Defense and his spokeswoman, a few others go out and walk that back. That was worse than if he had said nothing at all. Look, I mean, the United States, if you believe media reports, is currently warning all of our European partners that Russia is about to invade Ukraine. Everyone acts as if they're not certain what Vladimir Putin's intentions are. You don't have to have Vladimir Putin's secretary or his butler on the CIA's payroll to just look at the objective reality of all those tanks and artillery pieces and mine rollers and aircraft massing on Ukraine's border and recognize that Vladimir Putin thinks that Joe Biden is not up to the task of deterring a renewed war in Ukraine, and that France and Germany and the rest of Europe is not going to do so either. They're just going to sit around and talk and wring their hands.
Now, the General Secretary of NATO, Stoltenberg, sat down with Jonathan Swan, rapidly becoming the most effective reporter in Washington, D.C., and he blinked. The General Secretary blinked on the question of Ukraine. Did you see that, Senator Cotton?
I did. Regrettably, I think he simply reflects the indecision of his own core leaders. I mean, Joe Biden won't even provide the kind of accelerated arms sales to Ukraine that country needs. I'm not proposing, Hugh, that we should put American troops into Ukraine or that we should even put NATO troops into Ukraine, but we should enable Ukrainian troops to be able to defend their own soil from Russia. But that's the same thing you see from Emmanuel Macron in France, and Germany's political system is largely paralyzed right now as they try to form a new government. So unfortunately, the NATO General Secretary was probably reflecting the indecision of his own core leadership.
Senator Cotton, my boss at the Washington Post, I declare that because it's a conflict of interest for me to praise Fred Hyatt, but I'm going to praise him. He wrote a column on Coke and the Olympics, and he was very blunt with America's corporate sponsors, and I've been disappeared from NBC ever since I started to say pull out of the Olympics. We should not be anywhere near these Olympics. Our athletes should not go of their own volition, but the United States government is going to impose a, quote, diplomatic boycott, which is D.C. speak for do nothing. What do you think about these Olympics? Was Fred right that everyone should stay away?
Well, I think at a minimum, no U.S. government official should go, nor should any corporate leader. No one from Comcast Universal should go to celebrate NBC's relationship with the Olympic movement. Companies like Coca-Cola, whose foreign CEO, who's not even an American citizen, yet saddled up his high horse about Georgia's election law earlier this year, should denounce the Chinese Communist Party and its brutal repression of its own people and its threats to America. That's what we should do at a minimum. And Hugh, I'll have more to say about this soon. Earlier this year, I sent the administration a series of inquiries about what they're going to do to protect our own athletes from Chinese malevolence during the Olympics. Suffice to say, we have not received satisfactory answers from our administration about protecting our own athletes.
Last question, Senator Cotton. You've had Merrick Garland on the hot seat a few times, and you were right every time you've had him there. I'm curious, having just rewatched The Americans season 4, that's what I did back when you were in short pants and I was in the government, is monitor Soviet agents in the United States at the DOJ. And I think that the Chinese espionage in the United States, it far outstrips what the Soviets, East Germans, and Cubans did in the 80s. Do you agree? And do you think Merrick Garland understands this? Are they up to it? Have you asked him about it?
So first, I don't think Merrick Garland is up to the task of being Attorney General. Maybe he was a good judge on the Court of Appeals. I didn't agree with his rulings a lot, but just from a standpoint of professionalism, maybe he was a good judge. But, he just sat up in an ivory tower in the courthouse with 5 employees who worship the ground he walks on and read a bunch of legal briefs and wrote a bunch of legal opinions. That's a far cry from running an organization with 150,000 people, one responsibility of which is to stop espionage against this country. And although I never am quick to say that the Russians aren't world-class intelligence services and they wouldn't steal everything they could that wasn't bolted down to the kitchen floor, China, in some ways, is a bigger intelligence threat than Russia was. They have even more people, even more money that they can put into their intelligence work, and their espionage is more pervasive. In the Cold War, Soviet spies might have concentrated on Washington, D.C. and on our military. China certainly does that, but our universities and college campuses, corporate headquarters, national labs, any place where you have economic or technological innovation proceeding are riddled with Chinese spies. And it's well past time that the administration cracked down on those spies.
On that note, Senator Cotton, thank you. Good luck. I'll look for that Olympic statement soon. I appreciate your coming on. Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. We're continuing our memorial for Larry O'Connor, lost in the Snow Bridge fire collapse again of yesterday. Senator Jim Talent used to represent the great state of Missouri, in which many bridges are believed to be in danger, joins us now. Senator Talent, good morning. I know you mourn the loss of Larry O'Connor from Morning Drive I'm not sure where he's on, but he's gone now, and we regret that.
Listen, I have detected in your treatment of this issue a little bit of mockery.
Me?
And I agree with you about just about everything, but I got to tell you, you don't understand how real this is in places like Missouri. I mean, I have a bridge over the Missouri about 2 miles, the Missouri River, west of where I live, and I never go over that bridge in cold weather without Googling to make sure there's not a fire on the other side. The President's right. This is real, and I think you should treat this subject with a little more seriousness than you managed at this point.
I was being lighthearted until we lost Larry O'Connor, and I'm just curious about that bridge in Missouri. How far do you have to go when that bridge goes down in a snowstorm?
Well, the bridge over, this is the one thing I did quibble about with what the President said. Evidently, he thinks everywhere in the country there's another bridge within 10 miles. Well, a lot of places, the Missouri, I wish he'd called me because the Missouri River winds all through the state of Missouri. So there's a lot of bridges. And if they go down, in some places, you got to go 60, 70 miles. So it's even worse than the President said. I mean,
the trucker called from Sacramento and said he didn't even calculate the effects of heavy fog. And so he left out the heavy fog, too. So
yeah, he should have included the fog. And there's often fires after a fog. That's a common thing. We're very familiar with that here in Missouri. So, this is real. He's right.
So this is real. The President really did say that. Now, you've known Joe Biden a long time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the cloakroom, would the bridge fire, Armageddon, snow, fog thing come up often, or was it just an occasional worry?
Oh, yeah. Well, I always try to make people, aware of it. I think there are some people in some states who don't understand the significance of the bridge collapse, heavy fog, snowstorm, fire issues. And I am glad this bill is going to be aimed at, and then, the tree equity in the other bill. We have places in Missouri where we don't have a lot of trees. Now, we also have the Mark Twain National Forest. We need equity even in our state.
Well, in the northern shore of Ohio, we have trees and we have no bridges. You cannot get to Canada via a bridge. This will be a surprise to the Steelers fans out there. So I've never been really alert to the bridge issue. In terms of campaigning, when you would be out on the trail for Congress or the Senate, how many people approach you about the tree shortage?
It was never mentioned even once. I mean, it's like we have plenty of trees. Now, in North Missouri, they're a little more rare, but if you travel in North Missouri, you'll see a lot of bridges and a lot of bridges, them too. You'll see a fair number of trees, in various places. But
Senator, let's turn to the real issue, though. Just briefly, you just heard Senator Cotton. I replayed it from yesterday. He was very blunt. If they attack Taiwan, we will sink their ships. Should every presidential candidate be that blunt? Should the president be that blunt?
Yes, and let me, in the time we have left, explain what happens if they forcibly absorb Taiwan. So we are then at high risk of them enforcing their sovereignty claims over the South China Sea, which means telling us that, for example, they could say, you can't ship goods to Vietnam because that's our market. We're not letting certain kinds of products get to you from Asia because you've criticized what we're doing in Xinjiang province. The next step is likely to be the Senkakus. which is owned by Japan. They're already pressuring that. That's 250 miles away from Taiwan. They claim sovereignty over that, too. Taiwan controls, as you know, most of the high-end fabrication of semiconductors that the world relies on. They'll have that. And there's a high risk of the collapse of our alliances and our whole position in East Asia as a security guarantor. So that's what's at stake. I mean, this isn't just protecting the Taiwanese democracy, which is certainly something I think most Americans would have some sympathy with. This is our security in the homeland and our sovereign rights as a nation to move, trade, and travel in the world. That's what they're aiming at.
Is there, in 30 seconds, is there a downside for clarity here? Is there some reason that Joe Biden will not be as clear as Tom Cotton and Chris Christie have been and as you just were?
If to do it publicly, I understand why you have to be careful. You have to use the right language, but a private communication was the perfect time to say, look, you do what you think you have to do, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to put more anti-ship cruise and ballistic missiles in Indo-PACOM. We're going to improve our ISR. We're going to harden our bases. So you do what you need to do, President Xi, and we'll do the same.
Well, I don't think that was the message in 3 hours, Senator Talent. I genuinely hope you get a chance to sit down with Jake Sullivan and give him some advice on this. And you can cover the bridges and the trees. But while we're talking about bridges and trees, General Secretary Xi is looking across a very narrow channel. Thank you, my friend. Don't go anywhere, America. We'll find O'Connor in the next segment. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Nothing pre-recorded in this hour. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway, dealing with an inflationary spiral that is becoming, I think, perilous to the ordinary American. So I asked Charlie Dombek, who's a great sponsor of this show, keycitycapital.com/Hugh, to come back and talk to us again about inflation and what people have to do. Now, a lot of investment advisors don't really know what to do about inflation. I think Charlie and his team at Key City Capital does. Good morning, Charlie. How are you? How are things in Texas? Are the bridges out?
Good morning, Hugh. Great to be here. Things are wonderful in the great state of Texas.
Well, the president warned us about bridges collapsing and fires and how, it was one of the more incoherent speeches we've heard in a long time. When most Americans want to know what to do about inflation. So let's assume two things. Let's assume someone has at least $100,000 in savings. What do they do with it?
So you have to keep your money working, right? If you don't invest your dollars, you're losing purchasing power and your dollars are devaluing. So I like passive rental real estate as a hedge against inflation. It's the number 2 asset class in terms of protection against inflationary pressures. And that's exactly the type of investments that we sponsor at Key City Capital. And with rental real estate, when you invest with us, you get a rate of return from 3 components. You actually get a fixed guaranteed preferred rate of return, which is around 8% paid in quarterly installments, and you actually receive a share of operating profits and gains on sale. So in many respects, you're like an owner of a piece of rental property, but a portfolio of assets with us, and you get all of the benefits of ownership. In fact, you receive 80% of the share of operating profits and gains on sale. And we all know what has happened in the rental real estate space over the last couple of years.
Now, Charlie, the vast majority of Americans who have $100,000 have it in their retirement, right? They have it in their IRA or 401k. They haven't got it lying around, and no one in this audience is going to have it. They're going to work. They're not going to have $100,000 lying around. How do they put their IRA or 401k to work on this stuff?
Very simply, the great news is that we can accept investments from retirement accounts, 401ks, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs. You simply have to have a self-directed account. And most financial advisors don't want you to invest like this. They don't want you to invest and choose your own investments. They want to manage your capital. And frankly, they don't have access to the type of investments that we sponsor simply because they can't earn fees from them.
Can they roll over? Can people roll over from an existing 401 or IRA into Key City Capital by instructing their current financial advisor to do so?
Absolutely. You can perform a tax-free rollover into a self-directed account and place your investments in the Key City Capital family of funds. and the tax-deferred or tax-exempt status of the IRA is preserved.
Now, I don't want to not say the magic words. The magic words are, this is not an offer of sale. This is a security. Do your due diligence. Don't be a dummy. I think that's the official language, right?
That is the official language.
That's if it. Don't be a dummy. Talk to Charlie. Talk to everyone. Investigate. How risky are because it seems to me, if people are on fixed incomes, if they have assets and they're living on their retirement, that anything above 5% in a 6% inflationary world is going to be necessary. And if you can get to 8 or 9%, you're going to be winning.
And just think about it. What's happened in our fixed income investments over the last year and a half? Interest rates have dropped to historical lows. The bond market has been depressed. Annuities are paying 2 to 3%. Life insurance are paying 2 to 3%. Savings accounts are less than 1%. With passive investment real estate, your minimum cash flow on a quarterly basis is going to be at 8%. And because our properties have been located historically 90% in the states of Texas and Florida, our portfolio is performing well north of 25% right now when you factor in not only the preferred returns, but the share of profits and gains on sale. So you're going to significantly improve cash flow on a fixed income lifestyle in passive investment real estate. And that trend is going to continue. We have a very long runway left in the Florida and Texas markets because of the population shifts that have occurred during the pandemic. And with inflation continuing to spiral at unprecedented rates that we haven't seen in 30 years, you're going to see continued growth in rental rates. You're going to see continued appreciation in the portfolio.
Now, Charlie, I've got 2 investment advisors, and they both hate annuities. And I hate annuities. And so to all the annuity salespeople out there, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. People are morons if they put money into annuities. They get nothing back at the end of many of them. Some of them are okay. Charlie, talk to me about what you get back at the end of the investment period.
So with annuities, the financial advisors love to sell them because they're the highest commissionable product that a financial advisor can sell. In fact, the commission rate's about 7.5%. And the reason why you can't take your money out of an annuity for many years, maybe up to 10 years, is the financial firm that sold that product has to recover the commission they paid out. So if you want your money out at year 2, 3, or 4, or 5, you're going to suffer a penalty and you won't even get your principal back. So you have to hold an annuity contract for a long period of time. And in most instances, you're going to suffer from very poor investment performance because of the embedded fees in those contracts. I don't like them either.
So how long do you have to sit in Key City Capital, a apartment investment, before you can pull your money out if something happens?
Depending upon the fund, anywhere between 3 and 5 years. If someone has a financial hardship, an unexpected life event, we have a facility to get your money back within 90 days without penalty.
Wow. Now, Charlie, why doesn't anyone else do this?
Well, the financial advisors don't do this because they can't earn fees from it and they can't earn commissions. And these investments are considered off-market investments, typically in the past reserved for the ultra-wealthy. We've been able to develop a model that the average American can participate in and benefit from direct ownership of real estate without all of the hassles of maintenance, tenant issues, and things like that. So the issue is that these products are not available in the traditional financial marketplace.
Now, Charlie, do you remember, I like to tell people I vet my sponsors, and I do vet my sponsors. Do you remember the first questions I asked you when we sat down for lunch?
I do.
Which were?
Have you ever been sued? No.
Yep.
Have you ever had a judgment? No. Those were the big issues.
There was one other one. Any SEC investigations? Because I really don't want anybody who listens to my radio show to seek advice from anybody who's been in the crosshairs of the SEC. I don't know how people ended up with Bernie Madoff. Do you? I mean, people who make extraordinary promises have got to be aware that they're getting scalped some way.
Yeah, they are. And, of course, at Key City Capital, we've never had an SEC investigation. We are fully compliant with all the SEC rules. We have very good SEC counsel, and we have a third-party administrator that escrows client funds to protect their investment in capital.
Okay, so I want to put a bow on this for people because I genuinely want to be able to tell this audience at the end of the next 3 years, I told you so. And I'm hoping they listen to me. I don't think it's going to stay at 6%, Charlie. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, the inflation is going to run much higher. Look at what happened with consumer spending last month, 1.7% growth in consumer spending. We have excess liquidity in our financial markets. We've overheated the economy, and now the president wants to go out and spend trillions of dollars of additional borrowed money.
We already did. We just spent $1.2 trillion. So in my humble opinion, as a lawyer, not an economist, and as a person who doesn't do any investing himself, with one exception, I bought Amazon and Palantir. I believe that if you can get 8% or better in an apartment, it just makes sense to me that rents will go up if they need to go up. And so you have a hedge. Is that the secret sauce here?
It is the secret sauce. And at a minimum of 8%, you're performing 2 to 3 times the performance of your annuities, your insurance contracts, and your fixed income investments. You're going to do well in passive investment real estate in the current economic cycle and for the foreseeable future, especially given the focus that we have on workforce housing and the jurisdictions in which our properties are located, which are primarily south of the Mason-Dixon line in Florida and in Texas.
And I tell people, never put all your chips into one basket, but this is a basket you ought to look at, keycitycapital.com/Hugh. Charlie, have a great day. Don't go across any bridges. The president warned us about bridges this week. And
we'll watch the bridges today. Great.
Watch the bridges in Texas, but I appreciate it, Charlie. Write to Charlie, keycitycapital.com/Hugh. I told you so. I'm going to tell you I told you so in 3 years. keycitycapital.com/Hugh. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.